Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. Today's GLR Learning Tuesdays webinar, When Schools Are Closed, Harnessing the Power of Summer Learning for Early School Success. My name is Emily Samos, and I'm a consultant with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. And I'm stepping in to manage a few sessions in this online learning series. And I'm really excited to launch our month of partner webinars today with our longtime partner, the National Summer Learning Association. And before we get started, I'd like to go over a quick housekeeping details. First, I encourage you to use the chat box function to introduce yourself if you haven't yet. I see a lot of you doing that already. Sharing your name and your organization and your GLR community or the city that you're in. And when you do, be sure to select all panelists and attendees so that we can all know who's here. All webinar attendees will be in listen-only mode. I'm sure you've experienced that in several other webinars. To avoid any background noises and distractions during the presentations, but we welcome you to post any questions you may have during the presentations in the Q&A box. And we ask you again, if you could please make sure any questions that you want to get to at the end of the session, you post them in the Q&A box as opposed to the chat. We also wanted to remind you that today's webinar is being recorded and that a link to the recording will be sent to all who registered in a follow-up email that will go out later this week. And then we also will be posting a few resources throughout the webinar. Those will all also be compiled in the webinar that goes out to all registrants after the webinar. I also wanted to give you a heads up that we will be posting a brief "What did you think?" survey towards the end of the webinar to capture your feedback. And I highly recommend that, or highly encourage you to take a few minutes to respond. This really helps us with our commitment for continuous improvement. And so now I'd like to share some exciting announcements about some really cool upcoming learning opportunities with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Next week is GLR Week. And for those of you who participated in our last event in 2018 or in past years, you know this to be a convening that is chock full of workshops and expert panels and keynote speakers. And this year, like all recent events, it will be 100% virtual, and we will have the usual combinations of funder-to-funder conversations and community-led discussions. And you can see all of the great events lined up on the slide and hope that you will join us. In addition to the funder-to-funder conversations will continue throughout the month of July. And next slide. And we have several excellent sessions lined up and hope that our funder communities will join these sessions. So these are a few of the funder-to-funder conversations that are coming up throughout the month of July. And then finally, we will continue our GLR Learning Tuesdays. As you can see on the screen, we have a number of great sessions coming up for the rest of this month, our partner series. And a quick background on GLR Learning Tuesdays, these are meant to provide a predictable and reliable schedule that'll make it easier for you all to join for this robust series of learning opportunities. We've now hosted over 40 webinars since the launch of GLR Learning Tuesdays last September. And I encourage you to visit CLIP, which is the campaign's Community Learning for Impact and Improvement platform, to find the growing archive of resources for all of these online conversations that explore the best science, ideas, and programs for our work to ensure early school success for more children from low-income families. And the GLR Learning Tuesdays channel on CLIP was recently reorganized, and there's separate folders for each session where you can find the recording, the slides, and related resources, so please check that out. And if you're unfamiliar with CLIP, I will soon post a link in the chat box so you can find it. Okay, so now on to today's conversation. As I mentioned, this month we are launching a partner series of webinars where our good partners with solutions will share their strategies for early school success and improving grade level reading achievement. Today, we are very lucky to hear from a longtime partner, as I mentioned, the National Summer Learning Association, about the current trends and best practices for summer learning in the time of COVID. And they will be joined by our community commentators who are leading programming on the ground and adapting to meet the needs of local families during this crisis. And so now I get the pleasure of introducing our amazing moderator and my good colleague, Liz McChesney. Liz served as Director of Citywide Children's Services at the Chicago Public Library for 32 years and won numerous national awards for expanding early literacy programming across Chicago. She now serves as a senior advisor to the Urban Libraries Council, as well as a partnerships consultant to the Laundry Literacy Coalition, where she's developing early literacy nooks in everyday spaces across the country. And I'm now going to turn it over to Liz to introduce our stellar speakers for today.
Thank you so much, Emily, and good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are. Welcome. I'm really honored to be here today moderating what I think is going to be an incredible panel. And I know many of these speakers and they have so much to say and to share. Let's just start in the spirit of inclusion and respectfulness by acknowledging and paying respect to the traditional custodians of this land, the many indigenous people across our beautiful country. And then with that, I'd like to just set the context for our conversation today and then introduce our presenters and commentators. So summer is a unique time in the country under any circumstance. It's a time when learning takes a shift away from the school year and into interest-driven pursuits in the best of possible circumstances. But it's not always that way for all of our kids, right? You're here because you know that, and you know that learning loss can happen. And certainly our presenters today are going to talk about what that looks like under normal circumstances, but then also what that really feels like in this COVID world that we're living in now, where a true spotlight has been shown on some inequities. So it's more important now than ever that we keep our kids engaged and we think about best practices for how to engage our communities in summer learning. I am really honored to introduce Dr. Matthew Boulay as our first speaker. He's the founder of the National Summer Learning Association. He's an elementary school teacher from New York City and Baltimore. He's a Marine veteran, so thank you for your service, Matthew, of the war in Iraq. And he's also been named one of the most 25 influential people in out-of-school time learning. Recently, Matthew published a new book called How to Keep Your Kids Learning When Schools Are Closed. It's a new ebook for parents, and I'm so excited that he's going to get to highlight that today. Welcome, Matthew. And joined by Matthew is Aaron Dworkin. Aaron is the amazing CEO of the National Summer Learning Association. He's been their Chief Executive Officer for the last year, joined in 2019, and most recently served as President of the After School All-Stars National Network. For the last 12 years, Aaron led that organization through tremendous growth, doubling the All-Stars, the After School All-Stars national footprint, and developing a national office in Washington, D.C. to expand advocacy efforts for kids. He is a tremendous advocate for all of our kids. And then joining us as commentators, we have Mary Riggs. Mary is the Chief Program Officer at the Andy Roddick Foundation, where she oversees mission fulfillment activities, including child and family programming, grant partnerships, and serving as the out-of-school time intermediary organization for Central Texas. She has over 15 years of experience in the public and nonprofit sectors, developing, managing, and evaluating programs for children. And Mary's joined by Marby Shaw. Marby is the Assistant Director, there's Marby, of the Regional Youth and Teen Services and former Good Sam Manager at Good Samaritan Community Services in San Antonio, Texas. We're representing Texas today. Marby recently completed her master's in organizational leadership and has over 10 years of experience in the nonprofit sector, focusing on youth in out-of-school time programs. So welcome, Marby. And last but not least, we're joined by Cara Schrack. Cara joined Save the Children U.S. programs team in 2005. Directly before that, she was the reading staff developer in a Title I elementary school in Maryland, and previously taught both 3rd and 4th grade. Cara is busy raising student achievement in Save the Children sites across rural America, focusing on program development for the organization's partner communities. So welcome, Cara. We're thrilled you're here. So we're going to start this conversation today by framing summer learning around the fact that this is Summer Learning Week. And I think to kick us off, Aaron is going to tell us a little bit about Summer Learning Week and the research about summer learning and summer learning loss. And Aaron, if you could frame that through the lens of equity for all of us, that would be really a great way to start.
Sure. Okay, hi everyone. Can you hear me okay, Liz?
Yes.
Thank you for the introduction. Thank you to Grade Level Reading for hosting this webinar and including us. My name is Aaron Dworkin. I'm the CEO of the National Summer Learning Association. And I also just want to say this, I know we're all across the country, but it somehow feels like a little bit of a family reunion because we have so many partners of ours. And every single person on this panel is someone we've worked with, from Emily to Liz, and obviously our founder and now board member Matthew Boulay. And then we have 3 of our National Summer Learning Award-winning programs all on who we think are exceptional leaders in the field and on the ground, and they'll be sharing their insights, which we're really excited about. So it is National Summer Learning Week, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that, and this is how we're celebrating today. But our organization's been around for more than 25 years. Ron Fairchild, who's very involved with grade level reading, has been one of our leaders over the years and very important to our field. And I just want to say, I think we all, if you're on this webinar, I mean, we recognize that out of all the times of inequity in education, we feel that summer is one of the periods of the most inequity. And our organization has always been partnering with folks on this call to put a spotlight on that and to close those gaps. But in addition, it's also a time of great opportunity, as we know. To do more, to help young people learn in different ways. You can see here what our vision is, which is to always not only combat the summer learning loss, but to just really ensure that all students of all backgrounds, no matter where they live, no matter what their income level is, that they have access to a high quality summer learning experience, and to close the achievement and opportunity gaps that research shows grows over the summer. And just one other quick point here is that summer is also, by definition, a time of transition. And all of us during COVID right now are going through a lot of transitions, our school systems, our nonprofits, our business sector. But the thing about transitions are that they are amazing times to teach and learn and to remember those lessons, which will stay with us for a long time. So just a few quick framing points. I think we can recognize when we say that summer is a challenging time or a time of great inequity. It's not only in academic areas, and let's just recognize where we are in 2020. We have real trauma from the COVID-19 experience, not just students being out of school and working parents trying to manage work and their students at home and online learning and everything else that we're dealing with, but there are lots of people that have gotten sick, more than 130,000 people that have died. All with family, all with friends. And so this has been a really traumatic moment that we're in, and we're all trying to support everyone through. And so it's also a time when we know physical health is a little bit more challenging, to make sure that kids are eating well and that they're not gaining weight and getting their physical activity that's required. And if you're not in a program or a structured program, you might not have those opportunities. But again, we come back to the social emotional learning and the emotional safety that everyone is trying to focus on with our young people. Hunger issues, huge challenge, and we work with groups like Schrack and No Kid Hungry to make sure that students do have access to meals, and there's been a lot of flexibility now as there have been less students in real world programs, so accommodating families and young people so they can access those meals, huge priority for all of us. Articles about this, nature deficit disorder, if you know about that, but the fact that there's a real importance to getting kids outside. Summer is the time when young people get to do that most often, but there's, again, a lot of folks without resources and the opportunities to do so. We want to make sure they get that. Talked about the need for physical activity. If you have special needs during the school year, summer is a time when a lot of times those needs are not met. And we want to make sure that young people are in programs where they can be served and meet them where they are. Of course, we'll talk about learning loss. Lack of health care and opportunities to go to doctors and nurses is also a big challenge in the summer. And then as young people get older, we see the challenges around lack of access to internships and jobs. And all of these challenges are worse right now during COVID. So if we go to the next slide, please. Next slide. So just going back to some, seminal research, and there's been a lot of research over the years about the setbacks about learning loss. And I know we're talking about reading, so this is a reading, chart here that goes back, but it still just makes the point that, we know that during the school year, higher income, lower income students, they're all learning, maybe not at the exact same rate, but they're all improving their learning gains during the school year. But then it's really over the summer that you see setbacks, and you can see how the chart dips. Especially for lower income student, and then that is a cumulative effect, and in over years between kindergarten and fifth grade, the gap grows. and it just creates greater disadvantage and different gaps. If you could go to the next slide. Now, this is from our friends at NWEA, the Northwest Education Association, who came out with all the access to data that they have, and these are just projections. All of us are going to be doing a lot of data collection and surveying the impact of the COVID, time out of school and also the summer. But their projections, if you say so much of what we have, the NSLA has put out, just shows what happens from June through July, August. We had students leaving school in mid-March, and so they were just showing that, hey, the projected learning losses, especially literacy, are going to be much greater. So you have summer learning loss compounded by COVID learning loss, and then I know we're talking about literacy, but obviously math, and then all the challenges with technology will make things a little bit more difficult. So we have a lot of work ahead of us this summer to help students catch up, keep up, and propel forward, and then supporting our students and our school district partners as they enter into the fall, which is going to look very different, as we know. Next slide. This again is a little bit of an older slide, but I think it makes this point that about the opportunity gap and about how much families with middle and upper middle class families, especially, without blinking or thinking, are willing to pay so much for educational opportunities and enrichment opportunities for their young children and young people in their lives. And you can see whether it's SAT classes or, compensating for unpaid internships or trips and travel and all these amazing experiences, college access programs. And then again, if you have less resources, you don't have access to that. And we always think that is, just innately unfair. And we want to make sure that all young families, all young people, all families, all communities, schools have access to the same high quality summer experiences. Next slide, please. So again, I'll just make a couple quick points because we're going to hear what all this looks like in the ground and give real world examples. But where we sit at NSLA, we know that summer, again, is a unique time because it's a time for everyone to improve, not just young people, adults. So much professional development happens over the summer. We know that it's a time for innovation. And if you had a new idea and you want to roll it out, before you roll it out school-wide, or district-wide, you want to test it out over the summer. So it's a time for innovation, experimentation. We sometimes call it the R&D time for education. It's also a time for integration. All of us across the domains of education, whether you're a school district or an out-of-school time program, summer program, a business, a for-profit program, summer camp, we always want everyone to work together in education, but it's really hard once the school year starts. But summer gives a little flexibility and a time and space and a time to take a breath to actually implement partnerships, practice partnerships, and a lot of times those partnerships follow into the school year, and once we practice them, model them, we know how to do them. That's something we're seeing a lot of right now during COVID. We're really proud of the hyper collaboration and the hyper creativity happening. And the last point here is about the time for impact. That again, one summer we believe can change the trajectory of a student's life. One impactful program. I think all of us as adults can look back and say, oh, I had this wonderful experience, and that's when my eyes were open that I want to do this career or gain this skill or met this mentor, and it helped me connect the dots between what I'm passionate about and what I'm learning in school. So these are the upside opportunities we know that can have a lasting effect via summer. If you go to the next slide, please. Now, here we are, and a lot of folks, and we've been doing webinars just kind of like grade level reading has, and all of you have, where we're trying to highlight what works and great resources and partners that people can access and work with. But ultimately, and Matthew will share, because he just wrote a great book that's going to be made available to everyone for free this week during Summer Learning Week, and he'll tell you more about it with some really great activities for families and young people to do together. But ultimately, people say, well, what can I do in my summer and my young people and my children right now to make sure they have a productive, great opportunity in the summer? And we would say just, focus on 4 things. First of all, do something that gets you physically and emotionally healthy. It's not a time just to be on YouTube and watching TV or just on your phone. Make sure that you pick one thing and get healthy, and there are a lot of opportunities to do so. We also talk about getting ready for school. That's the last one here, but I would just say you can't catch up for everything right now this summer, but we've been out. Every student has something they need to work on, Hopefully we're recommending to our families and to students to have connected to their teachers. What's the area that they can most work on? And literacy might be one for sure. Or what's something that they are passionate about that they want to take to the next level? We say learn and gain a new skill. If we're going to have this time and you can't be in person and doing all the things we wanted, how can we focus and maximize this time by finding one thing, one passion, one new skill? And there are lots of great resources that we could give you, from Apple to the New York Times to all these companies that are creating curriculum for young people. A lot of that's has been curated and vetted on our website. We'll make that available if you go to summerlearning.org. And then another major point that I want to emphasize here is that we want to empower our students no matter what age they are, that they're not only leaders of tomorrow, but they're leaders of today, right now. And they're not oblivious to why they're home, and they're not unaware of the issues related to COVID and its response, and of course the issues of social justice and racial justice and structural racism. Everyone is aware, and they have a voice, and they have the ability, and now they have the time to do something about it. So I would just encourage you, there's a lot of guidance and resources about how to talk about these issues with the young people in your life, and also put them in position to be leaders and to take action. So if you could do those things, if you could, make sure kids get healthy, make sure they're getting ready for school, make sure that they're gaining a new skill, and make sure they're getting involved. There's lots of guidance on how to do those, but if you could do one thing in each of those categories, you'll have a really productive, wonderful summer. Go to the next slide, please.
Okay, Aaron, thank you so much. There's so much that we can learn from you. I love how you just broke that down into 4 easy ways for us to think about this with youth. I think those really also work for us too, as well. We're gonna have to pivot because of time, and I'm so excited to introduce you to Dr. Matthew Boulay. And you're gonna hear about his new book, How to Keep Your Kids Learning When Schools Are Closed. Matthew, will you tell us a little bit about your book?
Well, hi, Liz.
Hi.
Thank you. The best news about the book is it's free, at least free this week. So this is a great week to have a webinar. Emily and everyone at GLR, thank you. The idea for the book, is really how can parents within the home respond to the school closures, certainly during the spring and now the summer, maybe again in the fall. But if camps are closed, if even the public library is closed, what can you do within your own home? So this is really meant to be tips and tools for parents. It is a summary of all the research we know about summer learning loss and summer learning. I started writing. Liz knows, because Liz was one of my key partners and researchers. Did a tremendous amount, as did Emily, in helping me pull the book together. But we didn't start writing this until April 1st, so it really was a response to this crisis, and meant to be, kind of off-the-shelf solutions for parents. My wife always says, don't give an overworked, harried, stressed out mother something else to worry about. Give her a tip, give her a solution. So that's what it's meant to be.
I appreciate that as a mom. Matthew, you really dig into the issue of the absence of schooling and the fact that we're in this state of what you call unfinished learning. Can you share more about that?
The absence of schooling is this idea that while most of us think of schooling primarily in terms of learning, and we're sort of conditioned to think about test scores and academic output and the focus on learning, schools do so much more, right? And we know this from past summers. Before parents even get to questions of schooling and learning, many are asking questions, how do I keep my child safe and supervised while I'm at work? How do I keep my child well fed and make sure they have access to healthy nutritional meals when when the summer, or when the school breakfast and lunch program isn't available. And then beyond that, it's almost invisible. We almost take it for granted. But one of the things that schooling does is structure our lives, structure our days. You know, we have bedtimes and wake up times and meal times around schooling. And in the sudden absence of that, you know, a lot of us were left feeling directionless and really struggling to find a way to create structure that could replace schooling. And so that's what I mean by the absence of schooling, that it's really much bigger and deeper than the learning ways in which we always talk about school.
And you say that it's critical in the summer that we find this new structure, correct?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And it took us a few weeks in our own house. I have a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old. You know, and I came downstairs one day at about 10:30, and my 13-year-old, you know, was having a can of Pringles for her breakfast, right? And that's kind of what life looks like when there's no schooling, no reason for kids to get up. You know, I'm trying to work and have somewhat of a normal routine. So, you know, in years past, what we've always said about the summer is some of those habits that parents and families develop during the school year are a good starting point for how to structure your summer. So if you have a bedtime routine, and obviously this varies and depends on the age of the child, but if you have a bedtime routine, if you have, you know, a reading, kind of nightly reading with your child, if you have rules around screen time during the school year, a lot of those things you can sort of take that structure, tweak it, but use it as a starting off point to think about how to structure your lives. So a good example is, you know, if your kids go to bed at 8 during the school year, maybe they stay up till 8:30 or 9, again, age dependent. On the weekends, maybe you read to them every night, you know, try to do those things in some form during the periods when school is closed. What we used to call summer, now we just say when schools are closed because it's so much bigger than that.
Matthew, I was really taken with the dedication of your book. I'm going to read it aloud for everyone. Our children need us more than ever. Be strong in the conviction that the love you give your children is the greatest gift they will ever receive. Can you talk about some of the guiding principles that connect to this?
Yeah, and you know, one of the things that schooling does, and again, it's almost invisible, it's so underappreciated, but one of the things that schooling does is connect children to their peers, right? And so the idea behind that dedication was, you know, your children, like all of us, are feeling anxious and are probably socially isolated. And we often see that through the eyes of adults, and you know, we can't go to bars and restaurants. But through the eyes of an 8-year-old who suddenly has no access to his or her friends, or at least very different type of access, if it's through texting, you know, that's a tough time. And you know, I think what we can all do more important than anything these days is kind of hug each other and say it's going to be okay and empathize and try to learn and listen. So that's what was behind the dedication, Liz. These are the principles. Really, they're meant to be a reflection of the research that we've built up in this field over decades. I'll start with number one. I won't walk through them all, Liz, but you know, summer learning is not summer school. You know, you don't have to teach your child, you know, conversational French or advanced trigonometry, as Aaron suggested. Pick one or two things where you can sort of keep your child's mind active and engaged. And a good way to do that is to think about principle number 3 there, making it child-centered and child-driven. You can move away from tests and textbooks during the school year and really sort of follow and help your children follow their own interests. And then, you know, to sort of jump ahead, principle 7 and 8, you know, help them eat, help them sleep. That's kind of the structure and the routine. Remember their social and emotional needs. We know in years past, research on kind of a regular summer, that the absence of schooling can be a time for some kids of isolation, and that in severe cases can lead to depression. You know, and this of course is a severe case. So really trying to be in tune with where your kids are socially and emotionally. And then finally, just the last one is to take time for yourselves. We need to keep ourselves healthy so we can keep our children healthy. And I say that out loud because I think this is, you know, this is such a hard time. So many folks are struggling. So many of us are still isolated, and we need to be able to sort of say out loud, this is a tough time, and I need to connect. I need help. I need ideas. I need support.
Yeah, I think you've really approached this with tremendous empathy. And you know, as a dad, and I know as a mom, that this has been an incredibly difficult time. And you're not saying that parents should become math teachers. Is that right?
That's right. Right. You know, if you
Thank
can
you.
find, no, I was trying to say the opposite, Liz. Thanks for clarifying that.
Exactly.
Please don't be a math teacher.
Yeah.
You know, that's not the role that you need to play over the summer. Liz, you should, do we have a slide in here about connecting STEM and literacy, about your book?
I think we do.
Oh, yeah, good. I'll just introduce this briefly. Aaron wrote the foreword. This is an extraordinary book, and Liz and her co-author Brett put it together. But really, it is this notion of using literature to jumpstart STEM and STEAM activities. So I'll leave it at that. But Liz, you should spend a moment talking about the book.
Oh, well, thank you, Matthew. Matthew has been a great supporter of this work, as has Aaron, who did write the foreword to this. It's based on our work in Chicago at the Chicago Public Library in partnership with the Museum of Science and Industry. And it's really a wonderful partnership that's been in effect there for years and years. And this is an entry point, sort of like a recipe book for practitioners that pairs a children's story with a STEM activity. And we're going to be able to give a kind of bonus activity through a link that Emily and Jerry have made available. I think that'll be in the chat for you. It's published through the American Library Association. Really just honored to have it even mentioned here. So thank you for that nice shout out, Matthew. Like with Aaron, we could talk about summer learning and summer learning loss for hours with Dr. Boulay, but we're going to move on so we can hear from our three expert commentators. First of all, I'd like to welcome Mary Riggs into the conversation. And what all three of these commentators are going to do is reflect on what we've just heard and frame it around your own programs. So Mary, can you tell us a little bit about the Andy Roddick Foundation and your approach to summer learning? And what's your mission and your community and students do you serve?
Sure, and thank you. Thanks for having us today. So our mission at the Andy Roddick Foundation is to work with our community to expand opportunities for young people to learn, thrive, and succeed. And we do that by supporting and implementing high quality out of school time programs, including our summer learning program. So our summer program serves 3 Austin ISD Title I elementary schools, and over 98% of our students qualify for free or reduced lunch. And our program is, I was like, typically a 6-week full day program for just under 300 students. And it's designed to keep them mentally and physically active during the summer months. So children engage in theme-based activities in literacy, STEM, arts, physical activity, community service, and social emotional learning, as well as weekly field trips. And it's all in a team-based environment. So everything's very hands-on with small groups. So we can focus on building strong relationships with and among students and families.
Mary, that's great. I'm looking at that picture of all your beautiful kids there. How has COVID impacted your program this summer, and what was your response?
Yeah, we shut down on March 13th here. And so we really spent the spring talking to our families and really engaging with our students in a variety of ways. And through many conversations with them about safety and just really due to restrictions on space too, we decided that our only option was to go virtual this summer. So really changed our program model. And we started by talking through, if you want to, oh no, stay on the slide, sorry. If we want to start by talking through strategies to engage students and families, and we really spent a lot of time on how to make it as easy as possible for families to access and complete the program. We heard from many families about the end of the school year, kind of what Matthew was talking about, just being so much work and using so many different platforms and systems that it just felt overwhelming to them. So we wanted to make sure that this didn't feel like a burden on top of everything else they had to do. So to think through these changes, we started by revising our logic model and determine what we wanted to achieve and what made sense in a virtual space. And we landed on some non-negotiables that we didn't want to change. And they really aligned to what Aaron and Matthew spoke to earlier. So now if we can, thank you so much. So on this slide, you can see that we continue with some of our goals around social emotional learning, around academic learning, and around health, which are always important in summer, but even more critical now with so much trauma, uncertainty, and loss of resources for our students and families. We also knew that relationships and social emotional learning skills had to still be the foundation of all of our work, especially in a time when children are experiencing so much stress and isolation. And we also wanted to keep it fun while still being academically rigorous and ensuring that all projects were still hands-on for students. And while we always offer a literacy-rich program, we infused even more literacy activities and resources this summer because we know reading skills in lower grades are critical and really in jeopardy right now. And then we also wanted to keep it theme-based and find ways to engage our families in different ways over the summer. And then finally, we know summer meals are critical, and they're critical for summer learning. And our school district and food bank have really done an outstanding job in our community to ensure that everyone has meals, but we know that families would need a little more this summer too. So we built in a way to continue to provide families with fresh produce every week through one of our partners, Brighter Bites, and do a pack of healthy snacks each week for every child as well. And then as we were going through this process, there were also some things that we knew we had to honor and let go in this virtual space. And so most projects this summer are individual rather than team-based, although we still have siblings that are working together and sometimes the whole family's getting involved too. We also typically have a packed schedule and bring in over 300 volunteers and community partners to support our programs. But for ease of scheduling and logistics, we really had to scale back on that part this summer. We also had to reduce the number of different types of activities, the number of live interactions to make it manageable for families. And we also had to let go of some of our evaluation measures like peer relations because they're not together all the time, and add in some new ones as well. It's really to right size our evaluation to this new space. We were also all set to grow this year, but instead actually scaled back a little bit and invited just returning students to participate. So we already had that buy-in from them and that family connection. But we were able to open up the content to a larger audience, including an asynchronous online version called ARF Summer at Home. And so through all of our efforts, we're actually serving over 1,000 students this summer, almost quadrupling our normal impact. And then finally, one of the hardest things was we had to let go of about 75% of our summer team, which was just heartbreaking. But we were able to keep some really seasoned staff, and we were able to hire a certified teacher for each grade, whereas typically those are shared among grades. So if you go to the next slide, you can see that where we landed was a mix of synchronous and asynchronous learning over an 8-week period. So we actually added 2 weeks to cover more of the summer period. And we offer up to 6 hours of live activities for small groups each week. And synchronous activities really focus on literacy. They focus on monitoring comprehension and social emotional development. And we use the responsive classroom framework for all of that. And then we have groups that are broken up by grade with ratios of between 1 to 6 to 1 to 8 with 2 to 3 adults in every room just to manage student safety. And then students have another 4 hours of asynchronous video content along with hands-on projects to be completed over the course of the week. And we provide all those materials for all those activities as well. And we can still offer a diverse array of activities, including theme-based literacy extension activities. We have STEM week-long projects, art projects, physical activity and health activities, and social emotional learning lessons. And then we have virtual field trips, additional recorded read-alouds by volunteers. We have online resources if they want to learn more, and lesson plans for every activity in English and Spanish. And we're providing those plans both printed as well as digital if families need a non-internet option. And we're able to do a community service project with our families over the summer, as well as do personal weekly check-ins from our site coordinators with each family. And if you want to jump to the next slide, you can see that our kids are having an amazing time with it and doing just phenomenal work. These are their solar systems that they worked on.
Oh, that's amazing. Look at that. So clearly this is working. What are some of the lessons you've learned about moving your program to a virtual setting?
Yeah, and it has. It's been successful so far. We're in week 5, and we have about 96% of our students are still engaging with us in some way. That doesn't always mean that they're in all the meetings, but they're picking up materials, they're doing projects. There's a lot of texts back and forth of pictures like these. But it hasn't been without challenges. We definitely are working at a very small capacity in our budget, about 25% of our normal budget. So we're relying a lot on volunteers and support from other folks. But if you go to the next slide, you can see some of the key things that we learned this summer. And this is far from comprehensive, I will say, and we're midway through, so we have a lot more to learn. But first and foremost, relationships matter. And while we miss having the high fives and that personal interaction that we get, when you're in person with a kid, you can continue to build relationships in a virtual space. Families also really appreciated the simplicity of the platform that we chose and the non-internet option, because we all know the digital divide is real. And even when families have internet, connectivity can be spotty. And we also realize that keeping videos short is key, but that doesn't mean they can't be full of learning and fun. There's a lot of goofiness and learning in those videos as well. And always true for summer learning and out of school time learning, but really in the virtual space, quality matters even more. Everything we do has to be so intentional because we have even less time with our youth. And we also really still are carefully evaluating our programs and our work to make sure that we're continuously learning and improving. And then finally, we all know this in this space, but really don't estimate the power of summer learning. We were nervous about how the students and families would react and engage with this type of programming, but our students were so eager to get started and to learn. And as you can see from these pictures here again, they're really doing just fantastic work. Virtual programming, I will say, is the polar opposite of what our normal program looks like, and definitely not business as usual for our team, but it's been more successful than we could have imagined with it. And we're trying to put all of our learning together because we're the out of school time intermediary for our community as well. We're trying to capture what we're learning and combine it with research and the resources to share that out via our professional development video library and really inform our community on how to make virtual learning work for our students and families.
Wow, Mary, it's just incredible. I'm sure you're documenting everything you're learning and going through. I think we'll all be interested to learn more from you. We're going to move now to Marby Shaw. Marby is with Camp Good Sam, and Marby runs an amazing program. I've had the pleasure of speaking with her at the NSLA conference before. And Marby, tell us what you're up to.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. So Camp Good Sam is a program from our organization called Good Samaritan Community Services. Camp Good Sam is a 6-week summer learning program that's focused on literacy, peer-based learning, and outdoor fun. And as Mary was hitting on some points about what our traditional program looks like, it's very much in person. So we, our vision for Good Samaritan, our vision for Good Samaritan is empowering communities to thrive. And so what our camps look like, we're in San Antonio, Texas, so we're just a little of an hour and a half away from Austin. So about, we have different sites. We have 5 different sites, and our demographics are mainly about 97% Hispanic, 2% Black, 1 of other races, and then 56% of our youth in any of our programs are below poverty level. Also, we have about 96% that are in free and reduced lunch. And so this summer, because of COVID, we had to change a few things. We were only able to operate in 2 of our sites, which is San Antonio main campus and our Brownsville site. All of the other sites, it was difficult, especially our rural sites. Internet is not very reliable. Access to devices is something that, it's difficult. And school districts have seen it. Summer programs have seen it, that access to devices can be a thing, right? You might have a family who's sharing 1 device. Keeping all of this in mind, we were able to do a small pilot camp, in-person Camp Good Sam. Before we did this, we looked at our traditional camp model, which typically is 6 weeks, Monday through Thursday, 8 to 4 p.m. One thing that we always talk about is access to food. We provide our kiddos breakfast, lunch, and a snack every day. In each of our sites, we enroll at least 110 youth. So we serve in one summer typically around 800 to 900 youth. We encourage a 75% attendance ratio, and we mainly focus on elementary, middle school age youth. And we always pick a book series, right? This is one of the biggest parts about what makes Camp Good Sam. And so you will see in my office, it looks like a junior novel library. And so
Love
we
it.
always pick book series to make sure that we are reading throughout the entire summer. And so we provide access to books as well. So how it shifted, Liz, I know we usually talk about how it, what adjustments did we do for COVID and what precautions. So what we did is we reduced camp locations. We have smaller ratios. One staff member per 9 students. I can tell you typically we had about 7 students. What we did before we came on board was we have SOPs, standing operating procedures that one of our directors created. And so we looked at what CDC was recommending, what TEA, Texas Education Agency, was recommending, as far as who, everything that was being recommended, we put it together and we determined, okay, if we're able to execute in-person camp, what does it look like? In San Antonio main campus, we've usually had 350 youth. We knew that was already not feasible. So what we did is we enrolled 70 youth. In our site along the Rio Grande Valley, Brownsville, we only enrolled 65 youth. So what that looks like is all of our youth, all of our staff were temperature checked upon arrival, as well as our kiddos. With our kiddos, and this is actually a picture from this summer. All of our kiddos, we provided them face masks. They were plain white face masks. I have one right here. And so we were able to provide, we had these in their desk in a little Ziploc bag, and we changed them every week. And they were able to tie-dye them, to personalize them so that they would take care of them, right? Kind of that ownership. We made sure that we provided not only these face masks, but these small hand sanitizers to all of our youth. And then we, part of our SOPs are washing hands every hour. Every hour in transition time, we had our kids washing their hands, sanitizing of equipment. We were planning to try to have camp all 4 weeks, but due to our Texas numbers with COVID, we decided to shorten it to 4 weeks. So last week was our last in-person week. And like I mentioned, there was personal supply, there was no sharing. Our staff that were assigned, so also staff did not see other groups, right? So we made sure if there was ever a situation where somebody in that group might have been exposed, we didn't expose them to everyone. These are things that in that standard operating procedure, you guys can definitely look into, and always reach out to us if you have questions on how to do any of these things. So it was different, but now we have gone into our virtual space. And so we are creating kits and all, we have YouTube videos that we're gonna put out for kids executing the actual activities.
So Marby, am I understanding you correctly that you made that change to the virtual platform on the ground in the middle of your program?
Yes, we did. So once we saw the numbers going up, we thought it was the just, an abundance of caution. We said, hey, especially our Brownsville location, we know in the Rio Grande Valley, it's been increasing. And so we made the call of, okay, we're gonna have to go virtual. And
So
the
you-
camp
yeah.
was, they're rock stars. And so they were able to pack 2 weeks worth of activities in 3 days. And we got them out
Yeah.
to families.
So you've had to
Um,
be really nimble in
yes,
your approach.
yes. And I think the best part about executing whatever plan anyone comes up with is willing to just say, hey, let's try this and see how it goes, but know that it's not perfect and it's a work in progress, right? Everything we're doing, everything we're doing is a work in progress. And so we just say, hey, let's see if we can make it. And I'm very excited to report that we did 4 weeks with staff, with kids, and we've been very blessed that we haven't had any issues or any. And the kids were great. I think that's one thing that we were very worried about was the youth actually wearing the face mask. And we're like, well, how is a 6-year-old going to keep a mask? And they were actually, I think the parents did a great job of preparing their youth. Like, if you want to be part of this, this is part of the rules. Also, we made it more of like a non-negotiable, like no mask, no camp, right? Actually, the youth were great. The only time sometimes we had to do little reminders was like our 8th graders, right? But we were very impressed how we were able to execute all of this.
I'm so glad. Really quickly, can you tell us what you're thinking, how you're working with your school districts for the fall? I know you're looking ahead for fall.
Yes. So what we've discovered, so a lot of with the school districts, we know that districts themselves are trying to figure out how they're going to execute their summer programs. One big thing was, I know is preparing staff. I think you, as whether you're in a public library, whether you're with the district, preparing staff, being reassuring, right? And then relationships are key. So in our site in Brownsville, we have worked with our Brownsville School District a lot. So what we're doing is here in San Antonio, we're supporting our local district. And they are planning so far, I mean, it might change, but so far they're planning to do like 2 days out of the week and the other 2 at home learning. That's what one of the districts had spoken to us about. So one thing was they wanted to see if they could access our computer lab or our spaces to, because we do have iPads, so access to devices, right? Or access to Wi-Fi is the biggest part. Can you all support our programs, our in school with Wi-Fi, with devices, and maybe even some instructors to help tutor and guide the parents who sometimes have to go to work. We have a lot of students who their parents are essential workers, right? Another thing that we're doing in our Brownsville site is that the district looks for us, we have an in-school program as well. It's called Asset Building for Clients. It's based off the 4 developmental assets. And so with that program, we're actually able to go into the Zoom meetings with the classrooms, and we take over one session once a week, and we're able to provide some, stress reliever, some fun activities virtually for the staff there in our Brownsville site. We're also hosting after school programming. We still have like a cheer camp. We're going to have a stepping camp, and we do individual sessions. And then also being a homework support. So we have, and I didn't send this, we have a couple of partners. There's this free resource. It's called Fly Paper Tutors. It's a group of students from Columbia University who got together and provide homework assistance. And so we were able to give that to the parents. It's completely free online tutoring. All you need is 24 hours in advance. And it's called Fly Paper, like an airplane, little Fly Paper Tutor.
That's adorable.
So, and we partner with them and give that resource to all the schools that we work with. So it's just working together, and how this is not just my kids or your kids, it's our kids.
It's our kids. That's right. Thank you, Marby.
Thank you.
We're going to hear next from Cara Schrack from Camp Save the Children. She's from Save the Children. And Cara, I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about Save the Children's U.S. programs and your approach to summer learning this year.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Liz. I think the first thing I want to do is just talk about who Save the Children is. It might be something that rings a bell with some of you. And so we are a global organization. We're actually in over 170 countries globally. I think it's about 10 years ago, we had a lot of countries that flew under the Save the Children separately, and we pulled all together to form the Save the Children Alliance. So we are one global organization now. We actually have a domestic division, which not many people may realize. Here in the United States, we focus on very poor, very rural communities across 9 states. And I say the 9 states in a sense where that's where our programmatic work can be found. And we focus on prenatal, so pre-birth up through the school age realm. That's primarily kind of where our programmatic work sits. We also do some community engagement work and really try to bring to the table wraparound services in some of our communities as well. However, we do have other branches of our work domestically. One is our advocacy work. We have a separate division called Save the Children Action Network, and they are very active out there working to change policy and trying to really engage our leaders, our political leaders, in things, policies and laws that really impact children in this country. So the SCAN network does some phenomenal work across all 50 states at times. And then we also have a domestic emergencies unit where we respond to national disasters, which started out of Hurricane Katrina. And we do work on the border and all kinds of things in response to what's happening domestically in natural disasters. So there's a lot of work that we do here in the country. One of the things that I want to talk about is the fact that in our 9 states, we partner primarily with schools. We have about close to 200 school partners, and we have an early childhood. We have a 0 to 5 work. We do home visiting programs, and then we primarily do a lot of out of school time services. So we do after school programming, we do some in-school supplemental services, and we also do summer. In traditional sense, pre-COVID, we had about 50 of our school partners do what we call a summer boost camp. And like many of you, it runs for 6 weeks. It's 6 to 7 hours a day. We really try to integrate and balance academic with social emotional needs. They do team building, we do STEM, we do community service work. They do lots of field trips because we know our children don't get access to those kinds of resources in the summer. So if we fast forward now to summer of 2020, in COVID, we've had to take a shift a little bit in that. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But pre-COVID, or probably since March up until right before summer, just to share some stats. So when we work in the communities, we're not just there for programmatic work. We're really representing what we do with children, which is education, safety and protection, and health and nutrition work as well. And so we really stepped up working with our school age partners, making sure children had food, making sure they had some learning materials at home. We wanted to continue making sure our early childhood families still had that contact, so they made a switch to virtual home visiting programs. And so this was all happening right up until the start of summer, and some of these things have continued. But we were able to really work with our school partners. Some of our staff, you can see here, getting on the buses and literally going to people's homes to deliver materials and food, because we know in rural communities, folks may not have cars, they may not be able to afford gas. And that is a real obstacle and challenge. The geographic isolation, when you talk about rural communities, is very severe. We also really had to be a little bit more engaging and hands-on, and by hands-on, I mean by safely social distancing, because The digital divide is exacerbated in our rural communities. When you're in the Appalachian, the hollers up in Kentucky, when you are in the mountains in Tennessee, these are folks that not only don't have internet, but are probably using burner phones. They don't have any technology devices at home. They have very limited access to educational materials in the home. So we really took a lot of that into consideration. We also, trying to think about how are we going to do summer, wanted to take some of the feedback we got, and we were hearing even from our own staff about parents were burned out from having to do these take-home packets. And you know, they're trying to do whatever work they're supposed to be doing virtually and trying to support, you know, 3, 4, 5 children going on, whatever is going on. So being able to always be there to work with their children on some of the things that were going on in summer, we had to, you know, take a lot of these things and put the puzzle pieces together to say, what's going to work for us for summer for this year. So moving on to the next slide, we decided to really think about what do we know now that's so important about summer, addressing summer learning and the accumulation of learning loss, as Erin talked about. And then can we apply it? What would we have done I mean, I grew up without any digital devices in summertime, but we know so much more now about summer learning. So what we decided to do was build kits, and we are going to push them into the home. We did them in 2-week waves because some of the other feedback we got was parents are feeling they feel very overwhelmed when they get a lot of materials. So every community that we work with, and we opened it up beyond our 50 traditional summer boost camps, and once again, it was almost 200 communities that we're serving. And we wanted to say, you know, we went to our school partners and said, what do you really need? And so we weren't limiting it to those sites at all. And we just kind of really wanted to support the schools as a whole. So every school district did it a little bit differently. Some places, like in Mississippi, for a while, they completely even shut food distribution down because they were very concerned. A lot of Californian campuses were closed as well. But they eventually did come up with a plan because they also wanted to make sure food distribution kind of resumed over the summer. So they used that window of time to actually push out kits every 2 weeks to families. And it wasn't just materials and resources, but we built 2-week calendars of activities that coordinated with the kits so that the children could really follow the calendar themselves. One of the cool things we did was we worked with a company called Hands to Mind. They had some really free, great math online resources. And there was a QR code on the calendar. So if they do have access to a smartphone, they could scan the QR code, popped up to a video that talked about the math lesson a little bit. And if not, the math lesson was included in a packet so the children could walk through that themselves. We gave them things like a summer brain quest book. I think most children got close to 20 or 30 books because we know how important books are during summertime. So we know math is very school dependent on learning. We know they need books during summertime. We know they need to be physically active. So we kind of put a bunch of materials together, including fitness cards and a fitness calendar, frisbees and jump ropes, and tried to give them some structured activities that they could do themselves. And again, they kind of went out in 2-week waves, so it's not so overwhelming. We also tried to incentivize it a little bit. So we came up with some bingo cards, and I believe that they're going to be shared just to give you an idea. So based on the resources that they got, we asked them to try to complete one bingo in a 2-week time frame. And so when the parent went back to pick up some more resources, or if they were delivered to the home with some food. I had a colleague delivering 200 gallons of milk the other day. You just never know. They could share the bingo that they did, and they were given some kind of incentive, whether it was additional books that they could have, or whatever the school decided they wanted to do for an incentive. They also were thinking about bigger pots. So for every so many bingo cards they turned in, they could potentially win a Chromebook for the home. So trying to think about how do we incentivize to make sure the parents are supporting. The schools, we tried to be very respectful of where the schools were with technology because of child protection issues. We don't tell our staff directly what to do. They have to really, they are employed by the school district. So some of them would do read-alouds and activities on the school Facebook page and post them. Some staff would host virtual STEM activities that they could do together. It really just depends on where they were. And the very least, we asked our staff to pick up the phone and call and touch base with each family every week to say, how is it going and how can I support you with what resources I have? Because again, some families only have a burner phone. And so we really try to cover all of our bases in those regards, because we really encourage our schools to not cut staff and to utilize that staff for other purposes, not just for this, but to help with food distribution and anything else that may be coming up. They received hundreds of books from Scholastic and other companies. And so if they were willing to come in and could physically help do some of those, they could use their hours to kind of help with just plain distribution. But we as an agency were very committed to honoring a lot of our staff commitments, because we know this was going to be a very difficult economic time for a lot of families.
Cara,
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but in the minute that we have left, can you tell us about your staff and how your staff is doing and what you're thinking about for the fall?
Yes, absolutely. So in the next slide, our staff, so we have our program specialists, our staff on the ground, and they connect at the school level with the Save the Children coordinator and tutors. So right now, everybody's coordinating. They're coordinating with their schools to say, where are you and what you're doing? I think the national consensus is nobody really knows what they're doing, unfortunately, but we're doing a lot of listening. I sit on the national team. And so right now we are working with each state-based team to listen, to hear what are your needs. We are thinking we're going to, like we did with summer, build some options and encourage staff schools to put some things in place ready to deploy, so that if everybody is sent into a virtual mode, we're a little bit more prepared, and using that push-in model again, so that we're not so dependent upon technology, because many of our children get left behind when we solely rely on that technology piece. Yeah, so right now we're kind of in listening mode, but we are rapidly ramping up to figure out what our next steps are.
Great, thank you, Cara.
Sure.
Amazing programs. You can see why these are NSLA excellence winners, all of them. We're gonna move now. We have a few minutes for questions. So I'm gonna start with Sarah Reddington's question. This is a big one. I'm gonna throw it out to everyone, but I think maybe Aaron, this is in your wheelhouse. Is anyone thinking about how to revolutionize or implement a whole community summer learning approach given the current pandemic? We're already trying to plan for next summer and are eager to hear how folks are innovating and making gains in their communities and this new distance learning environment.
I'll jump in quickly. I mean, we're seeing a lot of innovative communities working across sectors, government, business, nonprofit. I think we know there's going to be, with more than 40 million people unemployed and tax revenue down, we're seeing a lot of budget cuts. I'll just say National League of Cities did a survey of municipalities. 2/3 are cutting their summer programming budgets, and then many more agencies. So we know we're in a time of limited resources and higher demand and need. So one of the things that we're seeing here, which I take heart in, is where there's leadership and where all of us on this call could be leaders in this. There's a lot of community asset mapping going on and a lot of conversations between groups that have never worked together before historically. Libraries and Parks and Rec and school districts, where they're saying, what assets do you have? I have a fleet of vans. I could drop off meals and book packets. Or I have books because I'm the library. You have you have students and you have teachers, and I have college students who are home. I love that resource you mentioned. So I think what we're seeing is a lot of folks who want to help, and people need to really just do a real analysis of where the gaps are, what the needs are, and how to pull people together and connect dots. I could give better examples, but I just want you to know that that's happening in lots of places.
Thank you, Aaron. I know you've got the big perspective on this. We have a question from Janet Morford for Marby. Ready, Marby? And you emphasized the difficulty for some families in getting reliable internet access and having more than one device in the family. How does your program deal with those challenges?
I was just typing the answer. So what we did for that is in our after school sessions, one thing that we saw in our Brownsville program was that, let's say it was a fourth grade age range session, we just scheduled them different. So we assume we didn't assume. What we did is if they were sharing a device, then only one session would be going on at 3 p.m. and only one session going on at 4, but it would be different age groups so that that device could then, be passed to the other sibling, right? Because sometimes there is like one device. Also, we found them different resources, connected them with their schools, especially during the school year. Sometimes the parents are trying to get the free devices, but we know the staff in the district. So we were able to partner and have like Camp Good Sam families or Good Samaritan families get those devices at a specific hour. And so that's what we did in regards to the internet and devices. Now there's like our site in Wimberley. It's very like Cara and Mary mentioned it, right? When it's hard when they don't have internet. And so the school was doing packets. And so we did not do a program. What we did do is we did a book giveaway. We still gave the activities. We still gave the book that was going to be, that site was going to get the Harry Potter book theme. So we still did a book giveaway for that specific site. And so one thing that we're doing now, especially for Brownsville, is we are putting our videos on Facebook. We have a specific Zoom, but we also put it on Facebook in case they want to go later, and we're going to start uploading them to our YouTube channel. So that's kind of what we're doing. And then I'm going to answer the next one, if that's okay.
Sure.
I know people are asking how confident were parents sending their children, and how confident were teachers to participate in the big spikes of infection in Texas. That was one thing we were very nervous about, myself included. We actually saw that the parents, well, in our main campus here in San Antonio, we're an open campus, and we actually had a lot of kids who were coming and playing basketball, playing in the playground because they're taking care of each other, right? Parents are at work, and they were still out. So it was, do we want to be safe? Do we want them to be here unattended, or do we want to just take care of it, right? Teachers were there. It was a mixed feelings. I mean, everyone was required. I think staff training played a big role, because anytime we trained, we did a virtual training. Anytime we trained, we did it implementing what are we doing with COVID, right? We're wearing masks. Okay, if we're playing basketball, we're sanitizing the equipment. We have a team who sanitizes. We got a fogger, like a disinfectant fogger that went around the rooms after every end of the day, right? And so I think the staff saw that we were really prepared, and that we even had if there's a scenario of contact, we had a plan for that. So I think once they saw that, they weren't as, and parents, honestly, I was surprised. There was kids who never missed. Parents had them here. And we only had, like I said, limited space, but it was not, I thought it was going to be an issue. It wasn't.
Let's go back. Thank you, Marby. Let's go back to that issue of digital access. Helen Kimbrough asks, I think, the $10 million question that's on all of our minds. And I would like to pose this to Mary, Cara, Aaron, Matthew, everyone. How do we remove barriers so students can access Wi-Fi, online materials, and books?
I know I wanted to share that we had a school community in Arkansas. So I think a lot of schools were issuing devices so that everybody had a device. We had a school in Arkansas where they had a bus that provided Wi-Fi, and it would just park in certain communities on certain days. So children could get on that way. And I just want to mention the Save the Children Action Network. They're actually really gearing up to do a lot of policy work and really advocating for states to be including ways to address the digital divide. So really making sure that we're equalizing children who don't have access to internet. So how states and how communities want to do that, it may look differently, but at least we have to have a plan to address that. And so I think I think we have to address it at the policy level, federally, state-wise, and make sure that we've got some funds available for those school districts to really think about what's their plan going to be. But I do know that that's very much we've always talked about it was in our periphery, but now it's front and center because it really the situation has exposed the situation with the digital divide. But that's from our perspective, how we're working through it.
Anyone else?
I'll just chime in and emphasize, when I was talking earlier about asset mapping, there are corporations where thousands of employees are working from home on personal devices. So there are devices corporations have that are available. I mean, this is a real multi-sector partnership. When I talk about hyper collaboration, and you have universities chock full of devices that if you live near a community college or a local university, you have families who have more. You have some families that have multiple devices and you have some families that have none. And I think if we can communicate with each other, we have enough devices to go around. The private sector, of course, it wants to step up, and there are many, whether it's Google or anybody else, Dell, all these computer companies, one, providing hardware and then others providing the internet access. And then the government, there was someone who typed in here about how they got the city of San Jose and Santa Clara County to donate the devices. So it's a lot of us here in the nonprofit space, or maybe with the school system space or some government agencies. I think we have to figure out how to really work across government, work across nonprofit, especially bringing our friends from the private sector and philanthropy. This is an issue that we need to take off the table so we can get to real work. This should not be the holdup. We know it is, but we could get past it, and then we could focus on the real work. That I just want to give my thanks to all the programs. So inspiring, all of you, to what you're doing. I mean, it's the work we need to do. And then also this point about next year. We all scramble to do the best we can for the summer we're in, but how does that not sneak up on us, and how do we take advantage of the learnings we're getting to experience right now so we're better prepared for the school year, but also next summer?
Thank you,
Liz,
Aaron.
Liz, can I add about, it's a great question about the digital divide, and just to build on what folks have said, I think we need to have a conversation about whether in this day and age, access to the internet is a public good. We've thought of it as a private good. And we now recognize, of course, that schooling, K-12 schooling, is a public good. And I think part of that recognition and commitment to our children is that in this day and age, it's nearly impossible for us to close the opportunity gap if children don't have access to the internet. And so thinking about how access to the internet is something like clean water, like elementary, middle, and high school education. It's just a necessary part of children's healthy growth and development in the 21st century. And so we're not there. We're a long ways from it, but beginning a conversation about it as a public good, I think is particularly in this moment of crisis with schools closed and traditional ways of learning, off the table, at least temporarily. I just think it's fundamental to as a nation and as a culture to shift the way we think about this. It's a great question, and I'm grateful somebody raised it.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Really important points for all of us to work towards. We have just a few minutes left. We have some kind of logistical questions. Cara, what are the 9 states that you do programmatic work in through Save the Children?
Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, South Carolina, Texas, Mississippi, California, Washington State. We do a sprinkling of programmatic work in Connecticut. I think that's 9. I didn't count, but yeah, those are probably our core states that we work in right now.
Okay, great, thank you. And has Marby, do you have a waiver form that you could share for your in-person program that you used this summer?
We actually put it in our registration form, and I'm not sure we can share that. I would have to ask. But what we did is we always have like a liability section, like if release of liability, but there was another, like an addendum done for like COVID verbiage. I can see if I can get you guys like at least just the verbiage and send it out or something like that.
That would be great, thank you.
Or shoot me an email. I can write my email address. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Marby. Has anyone experienced a child, staff, parent that tested positive for COVID-19, and what steps did you have to take? Did you do contact tracing? Fortunately, we don't seem to have seen that here, so that's good. I have a question for Erin. Erin, as a devotee of yours, I've heard you speak a number of times, and you talk about this is a time for us to be kind of the tip of the arrow and to really think in some new and innovative ways. Can you kind of wrap up what you've heard today, think through that perspective of using innovation to solve problems? I think you have, but would you just close us out in this period?
Sure. I mean, like there's the cliche that necessity is the mother of invention, and there are real necessities right now, and we're seeing people taking care of all the needs. Look, like not every day that Matthew steps up to write a new book, but the moment called for him to do so, and he did. It's not every day that all these programs are trying to figure out, how do I get you food? How do I get you technology? In a rush way and partner way and funding and so I think what we know, though, is that this is not, as Karen Pittman has said, out of school time now is all the time. And we're looking at schools that are going to be staggered schedules possibly, or smaller socially distant classrooms, and they need more space. And so, again, I think what we could always test out and practice right now in the summer is this hyper creativity and hyper collaboration that I think we're hearing and seeing across the country in all unique ways. And we want to capture all of that, pass it along, and learn from it, and also learn from our mistakes, because that's how we all learn. And then get ready for what can we advise to our school district partners going into the fall, into the spring, and then, like we said earlier, next summer. But there's a time for us to reimagine what we're doing, as someone asked, see what works, close these equity gaps, and really work with each other in ways we never have had the chance to do so before.
Great, thank you. And Matthew, we had a question about your book. We know it's available as an ebook, but I was asked to ask you if you have any plans to print it as well.
I'm glad to have the question. I don't think so at this point. It's so much cheaper to produce it and make it available. It's free this week. It's only $2.99, and once you print it, it just the distribution costs go up. So the idea is to something really inexpensive for parents. I do believe you can access it on Amazon even without a Kindle. I know some folks have had questions about that. I don't think you need any particular device. You can do it on a smartphone or a laptop or even a desktop. And again, it's free this week.
That's great, thank you. So this has been a really rich conversation. We have 1 more minute left if anyone has any questions. Catherine Perch has a question that I believe campaign will answer. about getting links for resources. But anyone have anything else? Doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
I
Go
was
ahead.
just going to ask Aaron, actually ask you to talk about the, so we know it was mentioned that all 3 of our community commentators are award winners. So if you could talk a little bit about the awards process, that'd be great. And then also more info about National Summer Learning Week would be great too.
Sure. And so again, thank you, Emily. Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity to share resources and to learn from all of you and be partners in this work. A couple quick things. First of all, I think it goes without saying, but I want to just say it, that we've all collectively been making the point that summer learning isn't just a nice to have for some, but a need to have for all. And I think this COVID experience has brought more people into our conversation than ever before, because they're all suffering the challenges that we're all trying to address year in, year out. And I think we have more allies and understanding and empathy around this. The other thing that we'll say is, so this is National Summer Learning Week. We have all these similar events. This is the way we're celebrating today. Tomorrow we're doing something with Discovery Channel around STEM. Thursday, Applegate Farms is talking about health and wellness and healthy eating and cooking. And on Friday, we're talking about what it means to be a leader of color in our work and some of the challenges, especially not just during COVID, but all the other issues going on in our society and what it means to run a nonprofit serving communities of color as well. So, and that's part of our leadership team. So all of this is about bringing up, big issues and spotlighting important topics and programs that are so effective that we want all of us to learn from. So that ties to what Emily asked about our National Summer Learning Awards. For more than 15 years, a New York Life Foundation has been the sponsor. It's a very competitive, rigorous vetting process. We get every year almost 400 to 500 applicants for 3 awards. And it's multi-rounds, and lots of people inside our organization, outside the organization, are looking very deeply at programs across lots of criteria. But we do it not only to honor and lift up programs that could, deserve some attention and spotlight, but also for the rest of us to learn what's working. We're all working so hard and so deeply in local communities that there's not always a chance to take our head up for air and say, hey, what's going on in rural America with Save the Children, or in this part of Texas, or in Austin or San Antonio? And so these awards give us a chance to spotlight. We honor them. We're going to be announcing our finalists in the next week. And then we usually, around our national conference time in the fall, we'll announce some winners. But we want to encourage everyone to apply. For whatever program you have, we encourage you to do so. You can find information about it. But these organizations that you've heard from today, they're not one-off, fly-by-night organizations that are great programs once. These are programs that are great year in, year out. We want to learn from them, thank them, appreciate them, and lift them up so all of us can expand them and give similar opportunities to more young families and young kids and families and communities across the country. So those are the awards. That's why we're so proud of these award winners. And again, thank you for giving us the chance to learn from you.
Thank you, Aaron. That's a great way to close us out. And thank you to everyone representing really commendable programs. Matthew, congratulations on your new book. And thank you to everyone at campaign grade level reading for having NSLA here today in Summer Learning Week. The hashtag is #Summer Learning Week. So please post your programs, your inspirations to that. There's so many good wins in this country, as Aaron said, that it would be great to really lift those up this week. And in closing, before I turn it back to Emily, the librarian in me came out a little bit as I was planning for today. I just want to close with a couple lines of poetry from Jeffrey Canada, who, among the many roles he wears, the hats he wears, as the Harlem Children's Zone founder and director. He's also a poet. And he has a poem called Love Still Lives Here. Matthew's dedication really inspired this. So as I think about all of you and what I've heard today, I really was thinking about this poem. As each day we wake to a child's joy or sorrow, together we'll work to ensure bright tomorrows. So we wanted to thank you. Friends like you are so dear. We know you believe in our children and that love still lives here. And here in this year of 2020, love still lives here. It's more evident than ever. Thank you all. Thank you, Emily and Campaign for Grade Level Reading, for having us all here today.
Thank you so much, Liz. And I know you, and I know your librarian past, and it's too bad we don't have time for you to read a children's book, because Liz has the best voices for children's books. So thank you to everybody. Thank you to Liz. Thank you to Aaron and Matthew and Mary and Marby and Cara. We are so appreciative of your presentations today and this opportunity to learn more about what's going on on the ground with summer learning and all the current trends and resources that are out there. I just want to send share another reminder that next week is GLR week. So I encourage you to register. I posted the registration for these events, a series of events next week from both the community perspective and the funder perspective. We also have throughout the month of July, a series of funder to funder conversations, and then also the additional GLR Learning Tuesdays that are coming up throughout the rest of the month. So we hope that you will join us for those. And we thank all of you for your questions and your comments and your participation today. And we really hope that you will join us next week, same time, 3 p.m. And then there's all these other events happening as well, as you can see. So thank you so much for your time today. And we will go ahead and close out the webinar. Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.